It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Sena, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
All right. Welcome to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. I am your host and curator of the hall, Jamie Dew, as Doug DeNance just mentioned. But I like to be certain that you're aware of who you're listening to. Welcome to season 2, folks. We made it. Wipe your feet before you enter the hall, and we'll get things going here with a special preview episode. We've got some great guests today. We're going to have some laughs, and we're going to just take a look at season 1 in retrospect, and then we're going to do a preview of season 2, including revealing the nominees. So buckle up, get ready, and let's do this thing. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce this next fellow first, because, well, you're going to hear a lot from him this year. I'm really excited to introduce Thomas Sena to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast as our new Chief Librarian and co-host of the podcast. He'll be handling all the conversations this season. Thomas, how are you doing?
Great. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for season 2. We've already kind of hit the ground running in many ways. I'm just honored that you asked me to be a part of this, and have just been having so much fun already researching and doing just behind the scenes work and chatting with guests that I've already chatted with. So this is just a wonderful opportunity. I'm so happy and honored that you asked me to do this.
Oh, it is my pleasure, Thomas. I think you bring a lot to the table, and I think that we are in great hands with you handling the conversations this year. So I'm really excited. I'm also really excited by our next guest, the grand poobah of the SNL Network, as it were. John Schneider is here to regale us with tales of SNL. John, how are you doing?
I am doing so great. Hi, Jamie, and hi, Chief Librarian Thomas. I love the new nickname. I can't wait to talk to you this season on the SNL Hall of Fame, check out some library books, and talk some SNL.
Yes, and make sure you don't turn them in late.
I will do my best. I always do.
And last, but certainly not least, she is a correspondent and social media wizard on the SNL Network. She's here today joining us, and her name is Nicole Rovine. Nicole, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm always happy to be here. Anytime I'm invited, I'm very happy to be in the halls. I take my shoes off, except right now my feet are on a chair, which is my shoes are on, and my shoes are on a chair, which is, I feel like, very poor etiquette in the hall. So I do apologize. I'm very happy to be here, though, and I'm so happy for Thomas, because you were one of your episodes was the main inspiration for one of the nominees that I brought up in the inducting ceremony episode that we did, which was Nirvana. Your episode where you nominated them was like a huge inspiration for me and gave me a lot to think about. So that was why I had them on my in my top. I think I had them as ranked 12th or something. And then I don't think they made it in this round, but I was very inspired by you, and it gave me a lot to think about because I love Nirvana.
Oh, thank you so much. I heard your episode when at the end of the season 1, there was all the pundits got together and we all shared our ballots, and we were on different episodes, but I heard your episode referencing my Nirvana episode, and that just kind of brought a tear to my eye. that was awesome. Thank you so much.
So much meta-ness here.
We bring people together.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes,
if you're just tuning in today, you are completely lost. But there's a whole season of the show for you to listen to. That's season 1. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit about that because we were able to induct Lorne Michaels, Dan Aykroyd, Chris Farley, Tina Fey, Phil Hartman, Steve Martin, Eddie Murphy, and Gilda Radner to the Hall last year. So a real coup, I think. Just a great first class, including the first inductee, Lorne Michaels. I just wonder if there's anything you guys want to say or comment on to put a button on our first inaugural cast. And I'll start with you, Thomas.
Well, I think, Lorne Michaels, first and foremost, the way it ended up in season 1 was Lorne was basically a class unto himself. So you actually announced Lorne as the first inductee before everybody else. And I thought that was so appropriate. I'm so glad that Lorne got recognized just by himself. And then as far as the rest of the inductees, I think it's heavy hitters. It's kind of no-brainers. I think all of those people were folks who going into this, I knew would get inducted into the Hall of Fame. I have no problem with any of them. I mean, they're just some of the best in SNL history.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Just a murderer's row, really. John, what do you think?
I think you can't really argue with most people who made the ballot in the first year. I think that, first ballot Hall of Famer is where the discussion gets really interesting. I think if you missed any of the shows from last season, including the pundit discussions that Thomas brought up, that's where the debate got very fun. And it was what makes the SNL Hall of Fame podcast so interesting to me, because this is not a situation where the SNL Hall of Fame is opening up in 1980, let's say, and then they're starting to induct people from 5 years earlier. We're almost 50 years into this show, and there's 50 years of hosts, musical guests, writers, cast members, just to talk about and go through. And it's like, where do you start to dig through? Where do you go? And what is the right criteria for inducting these people into the Hall of Fame? So all of those discussions are really fascinating to me. And it was really fun, in my opinion, to get to talk about, Chris Farley, Tina Fey. Those are some of the people who got into the show last year. And there were some pundits who didn't necessarily feel like they should have. And, why was that? Why did they feel, people who are, conventional wisdom, naturally first ballot Hall of Famers, why were they maybe not the right people to get in? And they did get in, which is so wonderful and fantastic that they had great careers. But I think there's a lot of people on the list, including, I would say, the majority of the original cast. There's a ton of people who you're going to see on year 2 of the ballot who I would say even deserve to get in even more than the people who got in the first year in some cases. So I think that's what's going to be so fascinating throughout this entire season with Thomas and all the guests that you bring on is just, does this person deserve to make the Hall of Fame? And do they deserve to make the Hall of Fame now? Is now the right time for them? And that's where I think things are going to be really fascinating throughout the season.
Nicole, what do you have to say about last year's inaugural class?
I agree. I think it was such a tight exclusive group when you think of like the hundreds, really thousands of people who have walked through 8H in different capacities and been a part of this rich history over the years. I think that anyone that we were all gonna, agree on and vote on who was gonna make such a small number, it's like, it is literally, you cannot argue whether any of those people deserve to be in the first round. It's just a matter of like, are there some people who maybe you would have, from even an emotional place would have rather like made it as soon as those people, like, what everyone has said. So it was really, I think, that was reflected in our rounds when we, at the end of the season, when we talked through every person. The first rounds, when people brought someone up, was like, oh yeah, we all want that person in, of course. And then as it went on, it got a little more contentious and fun, and people had more, debates with each other, and we all had different opinions. And so I think the seasons of the Hall of Fame is going to be very similar to that as we get into it, then each class is going to be a little bit more, well, of course they're a legend, but, here are 5 people that someone else think, that I think are more legendary, and like, it's going to be more, more drama, more complicated, I think, now, because it's like, you cannot argue, who's in there now. So it's just, I think we're just at like a good crossroads where it's like, okay, now it's going to get more heated. The claws might come out. So I think that's where we're at. Maybe, I mean, season 2, I think it's going to be like similar, that everyone is so deserving and everyone will always be deserving. But, I'm just curious from that, like, reality TV producer, like, energy of like, are we going to like stir some drama around it? I don't know.
Fighting in the library, Nicole.
Well, I'm the librarian, so I
happen.
think there should be a little bit of fighting.
Yeah,
This is a more
not up to you,
raucous
John.
library than most libraries are used to.
All right, your library, your rules.
Yes.
So the good news is we will be coming back this year with pundit roundtables at the end of the season. That will be a lot of fun once again. The bad news is going to be your job in the pundit roundtable, if you're selected, is going to be much more difficult. And that is because not only will there be 30 nominees coming at you this new season, but there are more than 20 nominees that remain on the ballot from last year, which means the ballot is going to be, nearly 50 strong. And with only 20 votes to cast each person, that's going to be very, very difficult. So why don't we take an opportunity for a moment to just quickly take a look at who we have remaining on the ballot from last year and just get a sense of what y'all think. We've got Norm Macdonald, Molly Shannon, and Maya Rudolph on the ballot in the cast member category. Melissa McCarthy, Lily Tomlin, John Mulaney, Justin Timberlake, John Goodman, and Emma Stone remain in the host category. For musical guests, it's wide open. You've got Prince, Paul McCartney, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Miley Cyrus, and Taylor Swift. And as writers, you've got some stone cold locks I would have assumed before the season began in Michael O'Donoghue, James Downey, Franken and Davis, The Lonely Island, and Conan O'Brien. Any one of those 5 nominees could be in the Hall of Fame, and it wouldn't look off to me. So what does that mean to you as a voter? And Thomas, you're going to have to take your librarian hat off for a moment, but put it somewhere safe, because you don't want John stealing it and claiming he's a librarian. And put your balloteer hat on, I suppose. What are some first thoughts when you hear that list?
I think that it's interesting that you did highlight the writers at the end of that, because there are at least a couple of nominees in the writer category that really shocked me that they're not in. James Downey, who, SNL has been built on a lot of political sketches and political satire and things of that nature. And James Downey is probably the foremost political writer in SNL history. He shaped that voice, that political voice that was so prominent in SNL. So James Downey does shock me, but I think that might be name recognition or lack thereof as to why James Downey isn't in the SNL Hall of Fame currently. Though I don't think the same could be said for this next group of 3, The Lonely Island, which to me, out of everybody on the list, and I know present company will probably agree with me, out of anybody on the list here of holdovers, The Lonely Island to me is the most deserving. I'm just shocked that they're not in. I think they have name recognition. They're so important to the show. I thought, we would get a lot of younger people voting in this, and that might have been to The Lonely Island's favor. But the fact that they're not in was just really a big surprise to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'm sure there's nobody more surprised about that omission than the person who nominated them. And that's John. John, you can comment on that if you choose, or if you've got anybody else you want to circle back on, have at it.
I mean, I haven't recovered since the moment I found out that they were not in the first initial class of the Hall of Fame. To me, this was egregious. I don't know how they were not voted in. And I would make a case for them to go into the Hall of Fame, but I've already done that. So
you did, yes.
So go back and listen to it. For me, The Lonely Island is just incredible, and they changed the game. I think just looking at this list, I think the other name that stands out to me, no surprise, is Justin Timberlake. I do feel like just has a very familiar format in terms of his hosting on the show. Really just for a period during a very special era of the show, was known as like that era's host. I think if we were voting on the SNL Hall of Fame 10 years ago, I think he would be a shoo-in. So I don't think that time should necessarily take that away. So I think that was the one that I was definitely a little disappointed with, in addition to some of the other writers that were mentioned. What I would say to the listener who is, checking out the Hall of Fame for the first time this year and thinking and listening about who they're going to vote to, don't knock the writing category just because you don't visually see them on screen. I think that this is such an important category. It's so, we talk all the time on the SNL Network about alliances between cast members and the writers and how they get together and how they create the content that they do. It's such a core component of the show. Please take that into account when you're thinking about your votes this year, because we cannot keep letting people like, O'Donoghue or Jim Downey or Franken and Davis not get onto the show.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's interesting, and Nicole, I wonder if there's something to the idea that the inaugural cast was so cast member heavy. We did get a host in there, and I guess technically a writer. But if you want to speak to the host and the writing and the musical guest category, what do you think the challenge there is with people not favoring those categories?
Well, first of all, I have to disagree with you, John, about Justin Timberlake, even though if you listened last year, you remember that John and I did some currency exchange there where he convinced me to vote for Justin Timberlake against my will, because it was worth it for me, for other reasons, for other incentives I had with other people. But I so disagree that 10 years ago he would have been a shoo-in, because I'm looking at this list, and we didn't do. I feel like just in round one, there was a lot of benefit from having distance from something. We didn't get really any fully earnestly contemporary people on there. We have people who have appeared on the show in recent years, or even like the year that we did it, but I think for around one, we gave a lot to people whose full influence on the show we have kind of had space from, and we can like analyze from a distance, which I'm very open to people who are more present. Like when I made the case for Miley Cyrus, like her influence on the show has spanned longer than the influence of some people on this list, and will continue to grow. But when you look at it objectively, it's been a long time, over a long period of time, and the infinite potential for the future is there as well. So I have to disagree with you about Justin Timberlake 10 years ago. I don't think we would have voted him in first round. I do, because I mean, I have to just get my own revenge for when you made me when you made a fair offer to have me vote for him, which I didn't really feel like doing. Nothing against him, but he wouldn't be like all the way at the top for me. But anyways, yes, it's something that we talk about a lot, I think, in our community, on our podcast with writers and the alliances and things like that. But it's very present and modern that we can even know which, or like that in general, it's a known fact which writers are behind which sketches, and the writers that I think are going to succeed are the ones who had a lot of on-camera time, or who became famous afterwards for other things where they were on camera, like a Conan O'Brien, or people who had a lot of on-camera time, like Franken and Davis. Tina Fey, obviously known for her writing, because ultimately she was such a huge performer on the show too. And I think that is just the culture of SNL, and the way that things have been, kind of how information has been disseminated for all these decades, is just the way that it works. Like, we don't know. We could say, oh, I love this writer because they're on all these sketches that I like, but we don't know. And in general, the public doesn't know which writer is behind which jokes. You can draw conclusions based on patterns, Or, if when we talk to people at the show, we can figure out, people will tell us what jokes they were written, or on social media, that's a new thing where more information is shared about what's going on. But it's not, you don't see writers and the America, millions of viewers do not see writers impact the way that we see cast members. And it's so much easier for us to say, oh, Tina Fey was such an important writer on the show because we saw her at the update desk. We saw her at Sarah Palin. We saw her in all these sketches. We wouldn't be able to analyze her the way that we are. And we wouldn't have that framework around it if she didn't also have a big onstage presence. And I think that's just the way it is. I think that the writing is so important at the show. We all feel that way, but it's just, honestly, it's just harder to evaluate without making significant assumptions about who wrote which jokes or who was involved with which characters. There's only so much, especially historical facts, where we can't ask the person in an interview, what they did if the person isn't around anymore, or whatever the case may be. It's a lot of assumptions that you have to make with writers.
And Nicole, as the discussion leader for season 2, that's actually one of my goals, is to cite specific sketches with the writers that we're talking about. We'll get into who those writers are, but it's like, if you like this sketch, you remember this famous sketch from the 90s? Well, this is who wrote it, or so we're trying our best to really to highlight and find out those specifics. But you're right, especially with the older writers, some of that data just isn't available. So I think those people might be at a disadvantage. And I love SNL Hall of Fame season 2 already, because we're airing grievances and exploring vendettas amongst ourselves. So so this is good. This is healthy.
This is you're all going to get invoiced for this, is what Thomas is saying.
Yeah.
This is therapy.
Yeah.
Okay, so the time has come where we reveal the nominees for season number 2. We'll do them by category and just go around the table and see what you think. Maybe a dark horse, or somebody that you think is a shoe-in, or just the general consensus of the field. So we'll start with writer, seeing as that's what we're talking about. And we've got, in the writer category for season 2 of the SNL Hall of Fame, we've got Herb Sargent, Jack Handy, Paula Pell, Robert Smigel, and Seth Meyers. So a really interesting group, I think. There's some newer writers in there. There's some legacy writers in there. And then there are writers that, date back to near the beginning. So what do you have to say about the writer category, Thomas, that you haven't already said?
I was so happy when I saw that Jack Handy was on the list. Because to be quite honest, this list I wasn't involved in putting together this list, which was exciting for me. It was almost like a present that I opened when I got the 30 nominees, and I was told you have to discuss these 30 nominees. So I was so excited when Jack Handy was on this list, and I hope that Jack Handy is relevant to not just people around my age. I'm 40 years old, so I was a kid when the Deep Thoughts and all of that was popular and aired. But I hope he resonates with people of all ages too, because his voice was such a unique voice on SNL. And I already I had fun talking about Jack Handy in our episode.
Wait a minute, you don't do those episodes live?
They're not live. Spoiler alert. They are not live.
Man. Oh, boy. John, what do you have to say about the writers for season 2?
Well, I was involved in putting together the list of nominees for this season. So if you do have complaints, you could always reach out to me. My Twitter is @thatweekendSNL if you have any complaints about the nominees. But so for the writer category, look, I think year 1 writers obviously really stacked. Year 2, there's some really fun nominees that rounded out this category. I sort of think that there's two that are really standing out to me above the fray. One would be Seth Meyers, who I think is largely responsible for pivoting at a very crucial point in the history of Saturday Night Live, going into this new era of the show, which I consider the third golden era. Maybe some people would say that he stayed past his welcome, but I sort of consider longevity a factor for me in voting for the Hall of Fame. So I think that that is a positive, not a negative. And then I have to look at Herb Sargent. I just think that just his contributions going all the way back to the original era of the show, writing for Norm Macdonald on Weekend Update. I mean, those are just things that are really, really crucial, and probably one of the more underrated names out of all the names on here, if you're not familiar with like deep thoughts about SNL, as Jack Handy would say. So, but for me, Herb Sargent and Seth Meyers are the two that really stand out.
And I hope I have somebody good to talk to about Herb Sargent. Oh, wait, no, it's John.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Are we doing that? Yeah, sure.
So I'm really excited about that one.
Yeah.
Should be good. Nicole, what do you have to say
Well,
about the writer category, especially in light of, I just want to preface this, in light of what you said earlier about the potential.
It's like a blind spot. I would call it a blind spot, like that we all have, that everyone has about writers on SNL. Even if you have full information, if you've talked to people personally who were there, like I think there will always be blind spots about certain things that were written of who really wrote what. That's almost a tongue twister. Who wrote what? But there's always, I would say, like a blind spot or assumptions that have to be made. So this is a funny thing. For me, there are two people, because I'm truly guilty of when people have more on-camera FaceTime, I will have more of a connection to them, or I'll be more familiar, more emotionally invested, and like that I think is a problem, that I have, that I think I'm not alone in. But what's funny is Paula Pell, who's one of the people who's standing out to me on the list, was honored in 2019 with the Herb Sargent Award for Comedy Excellence. So very full circle on this.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, I did not know
Herb
that.
Sargent. So that's kind of a funny thing. So yeah, the two people who stand out are, well, I guess I'd say three. But I'll talk about Paula Pell just since that wasn't mentioned as much. I would say her impact on the show, it spread a long time, and I think that you can just tell by her connection with a lot of people who were also on the show, as other writers and other performers at the time, has continued to grow. She's working on a lot of projects all the time with those people. I mean, Girls 5 Eva, we have to point out, she's very funny on. So I think that Debbie Downer, speaking of Justin Timberlake, wasn't she the person who mainly did the Omeleteville thing?
Oh, was she?
Right? I believe so. Yeah.
Was it a Hall of Fame worthy sketch?
No.
Oh boy.
Anyway.
Don't fall for this trap, Nicole.
I'm not. But yeah, Paula Pell, I think, had really a lot of influence on the show. And there is, this is a theme I talked about anytime I was on here in season 1 that I'll bring up again, is what? What was I going to say? Is when you measure someone's success just in the context of SNL, it's almost like a paradox of like, you can also analyze someone by how influential they were based on what they did afterwards and how their career continued to evolve. There are some people who made it first round who, due to unfortunate circumstances, did not have much of a career afterwards. But I think I was really picky about people who were super, like Lily Tomlin. I love Lily Tomlin, but I don't think I had her in the first round because she was so influential in the first part of SNL and then has continued to be so influential in media and comedy and acting and performing and writing, but not at SNL. And so for me, when you have that evidence of continuing to be doing amazing things in the field, but you're not continuing to do it there, like a Steve Martin would be a perfect example who has, then it's like, I think that plays against you. Whereas people who didn't even have the opportunity, I think that there's something to be said for like, oh, when you think of that person, you really think of SNL, which in a kind of a touching way because they didn't have the opportunity much after to do other things. So that's a theme I'm going to be thinking about. But anyways, so Paula Pell, I'm just a big fan of a lot of things that she's written. and been a part of, and all those things. And then Seth Meyers, I think it's great that he's in the writer category because he talks all the time about how he values the writing of anything he's a part of, so I think it's just like perfect for him to be honored that way. I know I'm sure he would love to hear this. So yeah, I think that he's, for me, of anyone on the list, I just feel like Seth is I would be very surprised if he doesn't make the second round.
Well, I will say that the next category is musical guest, and it has thus far been shut out from the Hall of Fame. The previous nominees did not make it. In fact, we lost a couple on the list. Nirvana is one of them, and I forget what the other one was. Where I'm going here is that the musical guest category is the elephant in the room. It's the category I think that is the most difficult, and it will be the most difficult for one of these 5 nominees to crack the list. But maybe one of these 5 nominees will be the first to crack the list. They are Dave Grohl, Elvis Costello, Kanye West, Paul Simon, and Rihanna. So those are our 5 nominees for this coming season. And Thomas, we're going to go down to Nicole. She's got a question.
I think Neil Young was the other one.
You are totally right. Thank you so much for that. Thomas, what have you got in terms of comments in the way of the musical guest category?
Yeah, I think that category is really interesting for, SNL is obviously a predominantly comedy sketch show, and for people tuning in just to see sketch comedy, the musical guest might be a chance for them to go take a bathroom break, or go let their dogs out, or go do any number of things.
The Baja Men are not nominated.
They are not. That's well. If they were a musical guest in one of the episodes, I would push for the Baja Men, but my biases aren't considered here anyway. So I think musical guests tend to get overlooked and overshadowed in the grand scheme of SNL. I think the one musical guest that's nominated this year, who I'm especially interested in, is Dave Grohl. Last year, as Nicole had mentioned earlier in the episode, I did the episode in season 1 with you, Jamie, about Nirvana, and Nirvana is dropped off the ballot completely. But instead of taking that personally, I looked at it as an opportunity, because I think Dave Grohl is an excellent candidate for the SNL Hall of Fame, not just with his 2 appearances with Nirvana, but he's appeared in multiple capacities, has appeared in sketches. He loves the show. So I think it's an opportunity to really highlight Dave Grohl now that Nirvana has been eliminated, I guess, off the ballot. So Dave Grohl is somebody who I'm really looking forward to talking about this year.
Great. Yeah, I can't wait to hear what we've got in store for Dave Grohl. He's appeared so many times. He is really a friend of the show. John, what do you think of this group of nominees?
I'm excited about it. I do think that, one of the reasons on the SNL Network we don't always talk about music is because it's super subjective. Everybody likes different styles of music. So you're not necessarily, when you're looking at this category, voting on music that you like. You're voting on who, as a musical guest, made an impact on the show that's Hall of Fame worthy. And I think in the previous season, you can argue some of the nominees on the ballot. I think in particular, Paul McCartney is a big name that was something to look at last year. And we've completed the Pauls here by having Paul Simon on this time on the ballot, 4-time SNL host Paul Simon. Lauren Michaels will be very happy to have all his Pauls on the ballot. But basically, yeah, it's exciting because I think he had such an impact going back all the way to the second episode of the show, where he hosts and does a complete musical episode, a show that really doesn't feel like modern day SNL, but sort of shaped how potentially music would look. He was very involved, obviously, in the first few years. A lot of performances where him and Garfunkel reunited. And yeah, he's been back in other eras of the show too. Paul Simon is just, such an integral part of SNL throughout the years. So I think it just makes sense that he would be on this ballot. So I am excited to see how well he does this year on the ballot.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a toss up whether one of these five make it or multiples of the five make it. Nicole, do you have a favorite? We've heard Paul Simon, we've heard Dave Grohl. Is there anybody on the list that you look at and go, yeah, they belong in the Hall?
Well, the first thing when I'm looking at all these lists, all these names together, is I thought of the song that Rihanna, Kanye West, and Paul McCartney all collaborated on,
Oh,
4 or 5
right.
seconds. So that's the first thing I thought of, seeing all these names next to each other. I think it'd be very funny to put Rihanna on at this moment in time, because she famously has not released music in a long time, and people are sort of like, "Where's the music?" But she's doing all these other fantastic things with her, like her beauty business, her clothing, her like lingerie business. She just had a baby, so it's like she's booked and busy. But
Busy,
it's been she's a busy. But it's been many years that she hasn't released any music, and so. Maybe this would be the push she needs if we're like, Rihanna, we put you in the SNL Hall of Fame as a musical guest, right? And then maybe she'll be like, okay, that's the kick. That's the kick I needed. It's time to release more music. But yeah, I love Rihanna, but I think it'll she'll need some. I'm gonna need to see another album from her in the present tense, or I'm gonna need about 10-15 years to go by before I can consider her. I need one of those two things to happen. I need either time or more music for Rihanna to be consideration for me. But otherwise, I mean, I made quite the case for Miley last year. I will be coming back to do that again this year. And Dave Grohl, I totally agree with, and I think it is the more. As much as I love Nirvana, I think that Dave Grohl, in every capacity he's been on the show, is like just the perfect Hall of Fame, kind of way to honor him. It's, I think, as him, because he's been on the show in different ways and all that stuff. So I would love to see him make the list this time, and I think he definitely can. And then Taylor Swift. I mean, maybe not yet, but you know what? Doing that 10-minute All Too Well was really epic, because with musical guests, I think it's, as we all saw, it's easy for musical guests to get left off of these types of things in favor of other, cast members, especially hosts. But I think that like a way to analyze whether a musical guest is worthy, or if you can put them in those categories with other types of people, is like, have they been on the show a bunch of times, but have they done something that no one else has done, or have they taken a huge moment in culture, in the world, and put it in, like given SNL the opportunity to make it bigger and to all that sort of stuff. And so I think that how she did her Red, Taylor's version, All Too Well 10-minute version, all that stuff, how she basically said, I'm going to be at NBC, I'm going to NBC this, she did Fallon and Seth on the same night, and then she did SNL. And so I think that 10-minute performance for me really solidified that like she definitely should be on this list soon. I don't think this round, but I think that we have to
interesting.
I think we have to start being like, it's in terms of contemporary young people, I think that she will be one of the first. I think she will be one of the youngest people at the time of inducting, for sure, like no doubt. And that's like, we just have to agree with that. I don't think that's up for debate.
She's a special talent for sure, and she belongs. So
she belongs, and just what she's brought a lot of that, and she's made SNL a part of a lot of these huge moments. I mean, All Too Well, and when we look back at it in 10 years, like that might be the biggest one of everything, all the appearances she's had. I think that one might be the biggest moment that we reference with Taylor on SNL.
Wow. You heard it here first, folks. We're going to move on to the host category, and this is a big one this year. There are 10 nominees like there were last year, and here they are. Alec Baldwin, Buck Henry, Candice Bergen, Chevy Chase, Christopher Walken, Drew Barrymore, Elliot Gould, Paul Rudd, Scarlett Johansson, and Tom Hanks round out the list of hosts nominated in the second season of the SNL Hall of Fame. Thomas, what say you about this list of superpowers?
Yeah, I was struck by all the heavy hitters that were on this list. And I'm looking at the list, and are all of them five-timers? Drew Barrymore and Scarlett Johansson are both five-timers, right? I believe so.
Yeah.
So this is a heavy hitter, five-timer sort of list. And the criteria, Jamie, is you have to have hosted at least twice.
That's right.
To be considered. So we could have, in other seasons or even last season, we could have someone who's hosted only a couple of times. But looking at this list, I mean, we got some really heavy hitters here as far as hosts go. I'm excited to talk about Candice Bergen quite a bit. I think sometimes she gets lost maybe in SNL history, but she was so important to those early days. And I may not spoil it here, but my personal favorite and the person who I think is the greatest host in SNL history is one of these new nominees. So I'm really excited to cover them.
You're not going to
tell us
Great.
who?
I will tell you when that episode is released, Nicole.
Whoa. Stay tuned,
That's going to
folks.
keep me up at night.
I know.
John, what do you have to say about this list?
Oh, wow. It is a murderer's row, with no offense meant towards Mr. Baldwin. But the list here that we have is just incredible. So many names, so many five-timers. And I do believe that the one that Thomas is talking about, I'm just going to put it out there, is Mr. Tom Hanks, who is just an incredible host and one of the greatest hosts in the history of the show.
I don't know.
Okay, could be not, but I believe Tom Hanks is, for me, definitely has to be at the top of the list in terms of just the amount of shows, impact, eras, crossed over, just really just a huge name. And of course, my man Buck Henry, who I will get to talk about a little bit more on the podcast down the road, absolutely dominated his era. Like I would say, Babe Ruthian of his era.
Absolutely.
So. Yeah, so for me, those two names are just really stuck out to me.
Great. Nicole, how about you?
Yes, I know who it is, but I'm not going to say who it is, right, Thomas? Should I not say?
I think so. No,
I'm going to keep it.
We want to keep everyone in suspense.
It's not Tom. I don't think it's Tom Hanks. Anyways, yeah, this list is a good list. I mean, Emma Stone is a four-timer. We're all like. I think I speak for everyone.
Emma Stone was on last year.
Emma Stone was last year, yeah.
Oh, right. So, but are we? I was sort of including last year in my kind of thinking about everything, but I'll just talk about this year. So yeah, all the new people. Yeah, I mean, I think again, talking about someone who's had like longevity over decades, but also did distinctive and not just in terms of funny sketches or memorable bits or whatever, but just like landmark things, obviously Drew Barrymore going on at such a young age and then also coming on as an adult and like someone who the public has seen at every step and who I think people just love. I think is just one of the most likable people in the world. So for people, it's such a gift. I feel like for SNL fans, for everybody to be like, oh, we saw Drew Barrymore at that age, and now I think it'd be fun if she came back. But whether she does or doesn't, I think her impact has been strong, and it's like a similar thing as what I said with Taylor Swift of when you share something that's a big moment in culture, and you put it and you kind of give it to SNL as a gift in a sort of way. And I think that like one of the moments with Drew Barrymore, one of the more happy parts of her childhood, at least, I don't want to speak for Drew, but like, I feel like knowing that she was on SNL and she has that memory is really sweet when there was so much else that happened to her. So, that I just love Drew Barrymore. And then, yeah, I mean, yeah, Tom Hanks is a big one. I think it's sort of like an undeniable. It's almost so undeniable. Same with a lot of people on this list. There's a lot of, I think I'm drawn to talk about people that are, yeah. But then, who else do I want to point out? Scarlett, I want to give Scarlett a few years. I want to talk about the people who I honestly think are more of the third and fourth round people. Who I think it should be Tom Hanks this round, and I think that Candice Bergen. Yeah, but
I think it's going to be interesting. Candice Bergen has got an interesting hill to climb in that for a lot of people, she was the person that showed up, in one of the most recent Five Timers clubs that people were like, I don't know who that is, not dyed in the wool SNL fans. They knew who she was, but I think the casual viewer didn't know who she was. And like you said, she had such a indelible mark on the show in the 70s. In fact, Lauren is quoted as saying, the show really became what the show became in her episode. I think it was the 4th episode, was the one that she hosted. And that was the first one that felt like what the show was going to become. So that's a pretty heady praise, I think. Let's move on to the cast member category and discuss it. It is, again, just really stacked. This is going to be a tough year, but this is the cast member category, and it goes like this: Amy Poehler, Bill Hader, Bill Murray, Dana Carvey, Jan Hooks, Jane Curtin, John Belushi, Kirsten Wiig, Mike Myers, and Will Ferrell. Like, if we had a show with a cast that was those 10 cast members, you just never stop watching. That would be compelling television. But we don't have a time machine or the ability to do that, but we can honor them with induction into the Hall of Fame. Thomas, who do you think will get your vote, or who do you think looks interesting on this list to you?
Well, one of the things that's interesting just in general about the list to me is that it spans SNL eras. I think the committee and curators did a really nice job so we have Jane Curtin and John Belushi and Bill Murray for, the original era. Most recent, like Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig and a few people scattered in between. So I think it's a good job. It encompasses the entirety of, I'm looking forward to talking about all of them. But it's just going to be so much fun, like just reminiscing. I feel like during these are the episodes just about the cast members that I feel like I might be like Chris Farley in a way, like on the Chris Farley show. You remember when Amy Poehler did this? You remember when Bill Hader did Stefan? Like, I just might have to control myself as far as just not being total Chris Farley show when I talk about all these cast members, because I'm so excited. And I'm going to leave you with this, like I did for the hosts, because I like just throwing suspense out there, that the person who I believe, and I think this is more objective, it's all subjective, but I think, I don't know, the person on this who I think is the greatest of all time cast member is one of the new nominees here as well. So I'm super excited for that episode. Nicole thinks that she knows.
Trying to vibe this out. John, who do you have on this list? Are there any dark horses here? Are there any how can you be a dark horse when you're a potential Hall of Famer, I suppose? But you know what I mean by the dint of the question. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they're all light horses. Is that term? Because honestly, so. every single name on this list is a Hall of Famer. So for me, it's just it's really hard to parse through them. You have a monumental task ahead of yourself, Thomas, trying to help the listener decide who to vote for from this category. Because for me, they are all absolutely incredible. Personally, Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig are two cast members that I grew up with and defined a lot of my original viewing of the show, and clearly dominated, in almost everybody's top 10 list of cast members of all time. So I think those names are easy shoo-ins. I think it's really hard to argue against anybody in the original class. So Belushi and Wiig, or and even Bill Murray by extension also, those names are just really on top of it. And then of course, people like Will Ferrell, comes in and changes an entire era of the show. So for me, I would be doing a disservice to the listener right now if I didn't mention almost everybody when talking about people who could potentially be in the Hall of Fame here. I just think they all have cases, and this lineup is stacked. So I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 years from now, whatever it is, we go back and we look and all these names had a very easy path towards the Hall of Fame.
I think you're right. There's not a name on the list that doesn't belong. And yet, we shall see. It's going to be in the hands of the voters. Nicole, if you were a voter, where would you cast?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what everyone said. You look at this list and it makes sense that our first class was so heavily cast members, and I think it'll happen again because it's like, yeah, it's just is what it is when you think of the way people define the show. I mean, I think I think that most of my weight, where I can put my weight, is going to be in the cast member category. Just looking at all these names and all their influence. I agree with John about just growing up, of course, with Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig, like uh, just like so imprinted. I feel like on my memories from when they were there, and I was like kind of figuring out myself as a or thinking that I was figuring out myself, when I was like in middle school or whatever, however old I was. But yeah, so them, I mean, Amy Poehler, I love. I feel like she gets grouped with Tina a lot, and therefore I think kind of forgotten about as her own entity in a lot of ways. And I feel like that's kind of unfair to her because she was such a powerhouse on the show with or without Tina. So many memorable moments, just such a like magnetic performer, so funny, so like just electrifying to watch and dynamic. And so I'm like such a huge fan of hers in her sketches. I mean, when she was pregnant, like very, very, very pregnant, and did her whole rap on the update desk. It's like I just feel like that was so groundbreaking for women in comedy and in literally any professional industry, any career woman to be like, oh, she is about to leave because she's pregnant and on her way out the door of her job, at her desk job, so to speak. She did a whole rap. It was high energy rap, and it was just very much like you can be a career woman again at a desk job. That's kind of a funny comparison, and be a mom and all that. And I just feel like that moment was just like something I will never forget. So I love Amy. And then, yeah, everyone on this list deserves it, like for sure. But those are the three that I will, say something on. Of course, I'd say also Will Ferrell. Honestly, I'd probably put Will Ferrell first of everyone that I mentioned. But then in terms of, yeah, I would say Will Ferrell first of everybody here, but just also more of like an emotional level, like Bill, Kristen, Amy, all of them too. And then everybody else, everyone on the list.
It's a great list. It's a great list.
Great list.
The Board of Governors did a wonderful job. Thomas.
Yeah, I actually, Jamie, I wanted to highlight one of them specifically, Jan Hooks, because out of these 10 cast members, Jan Hooks is the one that I would have thought may not have made the nominees list just because she was in such a stacked era, and that era is more synonymous with other cast members than it is with Jan Hooks. But I believe Jan Hooks is a Hall of Fame talent, and I'm really happy that she's recognized here. But I just thought that out of anybody, she might have been the one that would have slipped through the cracks and not been a nominee just because of the era that she was in. So yes, Jan Hooks. Super excited about that one.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait. I can't wait for the entirety of season 2, which is just a week away. And I really want to thank you all for coming together today to discuss and dissect, what's to come in this special preview episode. So thank you very much, Thomas, John, Nicole. I just want to go around the horn one more time. If you've got anything you'd like to plug or any place that people should check you out. Thomas.
I'll go first. I'm pretty active on Twitter discussing SNL and sports. You can find me at Thomas A. Sena, and listen to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. I think you're going to really dig it this season.
Excellent. John?
Well, It is season 48 time. We've been waiting for months for this, and I am so pumped. So this coming Saturday, we will kick things off with our premiere of season 48. And it's not just a big time for NBC and SNL. It's also a big time for everybody over at the SNL Network, where we're going to have coverage every single week of all the shows. Actually, 4 shows every single week that there is a new SNL episode. You'll find us right after the show finishes on YouTube for the Hot Take Show, where you can join the chat and tell us your thoughts immediately after. On Monday nights, you can join us at 8 p.m. Eastern for our roundtables, where we will break down the sketches in even more detail. This is a really fun show that I absolutely love doing at the beginning of the work week. Wednesday nights will be a really great show hosted by my colleague, Nicole Rovine, who is here, and Mike Murray. They're going to be doing some data analysis every week with the By the Numbers show. That's now a weekly show on the SNL Network. And our patron feedback show will be on Thursdays. And if you are a patron of the SNL Network, like my friends Jamie and Thomas, who joined us many times last year on the patron feedback shows, we answer questions from the SNL community each week about the previous episode and look forward to the next episode. So that'll be this fall, every Thursday after a new SNL episode. Join us for those patron feedback shows, and you can find everything we're doing for our patron community at patreon.com/the SNL Network. So looking forward to meeting all of our new patrons coming in for this fall to host some SNL podcasts with me. And thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Thomas, for everything you do with the SNL Hall of Fame. I really feel like it's a great compliment to everything we're doing over at the SNL Network. So appreciate you both, and appreciate you involving us in everything you're doing over here.
Oh, thank you very much, Sean. Nicole, you want to wrap things up for us?
Yes, I
Take us
also
home.
co-sign. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's so fun. I'm excited. I want to be a little bit more dramatic this season and get into some cat fights with people about disagreements about the Hall of Fame. I just think we're in for that, and I'm so excited. And then everything that John said about the SNL Network, doing a lot of fun stuff on social media, which is what I do, a lot of what I do over there. So follow us everywhere, and you can just follow me at Nicole Rovine anywhere, Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and whatever. I'm just rambling all the time. And yes, this was really fun. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for what the SNL season has in store, what the Hall of Fame season has in store.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be great. A nice compliments to one another. So definitely check us out next week when we kick off with Bill Hader in episode number 2. Guest number 1, nominee number 1, Bill Hader. That's what I have for you this week. We'll see you next week. And I want to thank you all once again. And you, the listener, of course, thanks for coming out, and we'll talk real soon. But for now, turn out the lights, because the SNL Hall of Fame is closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNL HOF. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next week.
To podcasts and such.